Shut up and sit down.
Hey everybody, it's the Takeover Tuesday podcast, and my name is David Allen, and we're back with another edition. And today we have Brian Swichkow on the show. Now, some people may inadvertently know who Brian is. They don't know his name, perhaps, but they do know that he pranked his roommate with a Facebook ads or series of Facebook ads and some retargeting. Brian, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks so much for having me on. It's funny that you say it that way. I was talking to a friend the other day about like the definition of fame, like internet fame. And
Right.
I was like, no one's gonna know who you are until you tell them. It's the weirdest version of it's the Russell Brand, like fame kind of loses its cachet when you have to explain that you have it.
Well, it's funny because I, of course, heard that story many moons. I don't know when it was that last year that occurred, or
2 years ago.
2 years
Two
ago.
years ago when I published it, it was about 2.5 years when I did
Okay.
it.
So I was probably even late to the party when I first heard about it. And so maybe dive into that just briefly, because I think it's a funny story. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was one of the funniest things I'd heard in a while. So just give us a little bit of backstory, what led up to the prank, and how it unfolded.
Yeah. I had a roommate about 2.5 years ago who very early on into our roommate relationship pranked me and carried it on for about 2 weeks. And when I found out, my reaction was just a slow clap and a swear of vengeance. And I said, I hope you understand that I'm going to put just as much effort into this. And he just looked at me with this look of horror. He's like, "Oh God, what have I done?"
Now,
And
what kind of pranking was he doing to you?
there is a gentleman's agreement that I should never detail that, so I can't say.
Even better, even better.
And so about 3 months later, I was playing with Facebook ads and having some like crazy results with custom audiences, and kind of I'd always loved Mythbusters. I'm like, if I took this to the extreme, like what would happen? And I was like, it's a small thing, not a big thing. So it's like, what if I had like one person in the audience? And I was like, I should do it to my roommate. And I created an entire Facebook ad campaign that only targeted him and just screwed with him for solid 2 weeks. And then he caught on, and I played it off and paused everything. So he was just immensely paranoid because he had no understanding as to why these ads knew everything about him, everything. And I finally realized after about a week that he was just like obsessively paranoid, and he hadn't been talking to his girlfriend over the phone. He was like so freaked out.
Thought he
Um,
was getting NSA'd or something.
he really did. It was and so conveniently it was right when the whole Edward Snowden thing was happening.
Right.
So like that really played into it. But that was a happy coincidence. And yeah, so I revealed it to him through a Facebook ad, and about I think 6 months later, I started a blog. I had a marketing agency and fired all my clients, and was like, I can do what you do better than you do it. And started a blog, and I was like, I want to, what's my uniqueness? And I said, I want to teach, but I want to teach through stories, and I want to only teach one thing. I hate the bullet point bullshit, as I call it. And I was like, I want to teach the one thing I learned through the story that I learned it. And I was like, that's where I start. And so I wrote that story and two others, and it went crazy. I had about 450,000 people to my site in the first 3 days without a dollar spent on ads.
Wow, that is incredible reach with such a, for nothing, right? For just an incredible story, of course.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing that I started teaching is that, like people kind of play this long game of like, I can do ads and I can build an audience and so on and so forth. But there's so many established audiences, like on Reddit was where I kind of launched. And I basically said like, that the chronology of it was I need my USP. What's my USP for the blog? And it's stories entertainingly wrapped in humor. And then immediately jumped to that's the story I have to start with, and then said, all right, well, I've heard of like lots of traffic coming from Reddit, and this is right when I got started with Reddit. So I was like, would they be interested? So I kind of learned the language and figured out, I wanted to write it for the marketing subreddit, and I learned that, and then I wrote it for them. Like I have a version that I tell my mom, and it's like a 2 minute version. And then I have a version that I tell like, an internet marketer, and it's like a 2 hour version, and it's theatrical and entertaining. And I tell, I talk about what the ads are. So that was the version that I told for those people because I knew that they would really appreciate the like the how deep I went into it. And so I had the idea and I wrote it for a specific audience and I put it there and they were like, this is amazing. And they shared it and then got picked up by like Adweek and Business Insider. And it was something like 5 million earned media impressions in the first year. And again, not a dime spent in advertising, unless you count the $1.70 on the prank. So that's kind of what I've been doing is just, finding existing audiences, figuring out what they like and then making something for them. And then they talk about it for you.
Well, that is amazing. It's such a good story. I remember when I first heard it, I thought, boy, that is brilliant. And maybe go back and sort of give us a bit of your superhero origin story. How did you get into marketing? How did you get into, mucking with Facebook ads and so forth? Maybe some of the jobs you had growing up and so forth. What sort of drove you in this direction?
Yeah, I mean, I was a very poor communicator as a kid. My parents, my sister are all very social, very extroverted. My sister was like, head of student government, and my dad's now the president of our synagogue, and like my mom, always has like a mahjong group. Like they always do
Right.
social stuff. And as a kid, I just remember always being frustrated, not being able to communicate, and just like, you don't understand what I'm saying. Like I'm saying the thing, and you're not getting it. And it took me the longest time to realize that I'm just a very empathetic person, and I was understanding things that weren't being said, and the other person didn't know that, and so it was just kind of a gap in communication. So I, over the course of my life, became very obsessed with communication. And in college, I ended up doing graphic design. Well, I switched from networking, which was terrible, to graphic design, and then I was like, oh, I love how you can make someone feel something without saying anything. And then after school, I kind of inadvertently started a marketing agency because I had a really crappy job and just wanted to pick up some money on the side. Started hiring friends to do the things that I wasn't as good at, and it became a thing, and kind of broke into it from there. Everything else is just learned. Hey, I've heard of these Facebook ad things, and I should learn how to do the Facebook ad thing. So I started reading, and bought a few courses, and kind of outgrew the courses, and bought another course. I started with Amy Porterfield's Facebook course, and then kind of actually went to a conference and read off some of my results using her course. And everybody was like, "Wow, that's amazing! Amy Porterfield's awesome." And I'm like, "I know, right?" And then Amy Porterfield said, "I want to do a case study on your result." I'm like, "Sure, like you can brag that your course did this for me." And I gave her my results, and she just looked at them and was like, and she stopped talking to me, which is so weird. And
Really?
I think it was because I heard her brag on a webinar, like I don't know, months later, about how much she was paying for clicks, and mine was like a third of that. Uh, so I was like, oh, okay, that might be why. And then I went to John Loomer and started watching his stuff, and then kind of outgrew that, and just went on from there. I mean, it's experimentation. I always look at everything that I do as an experiment, because if it fails, then you learn something, and if it succeeds, then you win something. So it's a win-win, and there's no emotional stress tied to that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good, healthy way to look at things. And as copywriters, of course, uh, we are taught to test. Hopefully, if you get the right people, or you're writing for yourself, you get to A/B test, the crap out of something until you get it right, because you only have to be right once.
Yeah. Well, I think testing and experimentation are a little different, just in terms of psychology, because testing, like, you A versus B, like which is a better headline. But I mean, the big experiment that I did like a few months ago is I had this email list that was cold. Like I'd emailed them I think 6 times in a year. They had
Okay.
no clue who I was. And every time I thought about it, I was like, oh, I should email this to my list. Every time I thought about it, I got angsty, because every time I did, they didn't know who I was. They'd, oh, it's a spam. I never signed up. And they'd unsubscribe. And so it caused me anxiety, because I wanted to do it, but I knew that it was just cold. And I finally got to this point one day early this year. It was like January 15th. And I just said, fuck it. Like just the biggest version of fuck it possible. And
With
and I said, like,
capital fuck it.
yeah, and I'm just like, you know what? Like, it's not doing me any good. And whether it's sitting there cold or I don't have a list, it's the same thing. So it's like, I'm just going to fucking annoy, and I'm going to curse like a mofo, but I was like, I'm gonna burn my list. I was like, I'm gonna email them every single day until they either unsubscribe or buy something. And I'm never gonna sell them something. I'm just gonna annoy the shit out of them until they do. My goal that I set was I'm going to email my list every day in 2016, even if my mother is the only one left subscribed, because worst case scenario, I talk to my mom more often. And the first email that I sent, the subject line was unsubscribe now. And then in the email, it's like, I once talked about how sex is a lot like conversions. And I said,
Yes.
the internet is the bar, your website is your house, your email list is your bedroom, and customer acquisition is, well, you get the point. Like, let me put this straight. We're in my bedroom, lying on my bed, staring longingly into each other's eyes, and I'm asking you straight up, are you here to cuddle or are you here to fuck? And like 109 people unsubscribed instantly, but I got probably 50 emails of people like, what are you even doing? And yeah, it was like 150,000 words, and 105 days later, I ended up kind of pulling back because I was like, all right, this is a little too much. But it was a fun adventure, and the whole thing was an experiment. Like testing is, you try a variant of something that you're currently doing. It's a slight change. Experimentation is like sheets to the wind,
changes, yeah.
do whatever the fuck you can come up with, and the more ridiculous, the better, because the further you push to the fringe, the more information you get about what's there.
Right. Now, I'm glad you brought that up, because that was one of the notes on my to ask you about. I thought that the way you put that, are you here to cuddle or are you here to fuck, is the perfect. In fact, I used that terminology with a client of mine more recently, because he did not want to email his list every day, and he is now emailing his list twice a day. So, so once we saw once he was saw the results, then of what I was advocating and pushing him to do, then yeah, I mean, you will see, this experimentation. I mean, people are afraid to try things, but that's the whole point of experimentation, is overcome those fears.
Right. And a lot of times you have to justify it a little bit. I mean, for me, I kind of was like, well, that's insane. And at the time I had, 2,700 people on my list. And I was like, well, that's insane. But hold on a second. My goal for the end of 16 was to get 136 people into my membership group. And I was like, okay, so let's do out the math. So if I get 95 and a half, I think it was 95.5% of people to unsubscribe from my list, assuming at that point, if I solely by emailing people every day, just random stuff, I talked about my dating life, I talked about Facebook ads and clients and whatever was on my mind, and whatever I had talked to people about the day before in private emails. So it's kind of like a group thing. I was like, if I can annoy 95.5% of the people off my list over the course of a year, chances are that 4.5% that's left is going to have joined, and that makes me hit my goal.
Yep.
So I was like, why the hell not?
Yeah. No, I think it's a perfect example of finding your people.
Yeah, I call it my minority, the people who are just like in my zone and like love it, versus everybody else. It's like, okay, that's not really funny. You're kind of weird, dude. Like, you're not my minority. It's cool.
Yeah, no, it is. I mean, there's that sort of famous article by Wired magazine editor Kevin Kelly about 1,000 true fans, whatever,
Yeah.
that you hear bandied about a lot, and that's a way to find them.
That was one of the things that was what I was operating on. I'd read that probably late last year, and that was on my mind.
Right. So that was one experiment. The Facebook prank was an experiment. The cuddle or fuck email experiment. What sort of other things have you endeavored to experiment with?
I like building things, and once I've done something, I kind of move on to something different. So I've done software, I've done e-commerce, I've done publishing. Software-wise, and you'll notice a trend that it usually involves some alcohol. I was hanging out with some internet marketers at this like private mastermind, and having a great conversation, talking about like if you're ever talking to an internet marketer and alcohol is present and you want to get to know them very, very quickly, ask the question, what's the most ridiculous way you've ever made money online?
Right.
You will get to know them very quickly. So we had that discussion, which is a different story entirely. But then, we started talking about like, he asked me a question. I'm like, I've been trying to figure out this thing. I'm like, I'm sick and tired. I don't carry business cards. I'm sick and tired of giving out my email to people because it's so hard to like yell it at a loud, event in a conference or whatever. And I'm like, what's the most ridiculous email that you could give out at a bar? And I was like, what makes a statement? And we ended up coming up with this idea so that if, you're talking to a cute girl at a conference or something and she's like, oh, let's stay in touch, like a business thing, like what's your email? And it's like, it's Brian with an I, yep, Brian, yep, at yourplacetonight.com. And so we like came up with the idea, and I immediately bought the domain. I'm like, this is fucking hilarious. All of my friends are gonna want to play with this because it's so cheesy, it's terrible and hysterical. Like it's so far down the line of terrible that it's actually funny.
Yeah.
And so then I kind of like immediately realized that all of my friends were gonna want an email address, and then I was like, I'm lazy, so I was like, I can just build an app that allows anyone to register any email address they want at that domain and have it forwarded. And then I'm like, wait a second, Reddit would think that's hilarious. And so I built out a site, which the site probably, design and dev like took less than a week, but knowing how much traffic it was going to get hit with, I was like, all right, there's some leverage here and I need to play with it. So I spent about 4 months like hitting my devs over the head, like faster, 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 make this server faster.
Right.
And they were like, why can't we just launch it and see how it goes and we can build out from there? I'm like, you don't understand. Reddit.
And it's gonna get crushed.
Yeah. And so when my blog launched, it was hit with about, I think it was like 12 to 13 concurrent requests per second, about 5,000 people on the site simultaneously. The server crashed 3 times and cost me about $1,500 to get it back up because I had to keep upgrading. This one, it was like $200 a quarter, and it can handle 30 concurrent requests per second. So it's beastly. So at the bottom, it said Reddit hug of death prevented by InMotion hosting. And I'd structured an affiliate deal with them that anything that came through, they would pay me an affiliate commission. So it was like flat out affiliate sale, like above board, Reddit's looking at it like, okay, we know exactly what you're doing. So I launched it, and people just started, it got bombed instantly. And people were like, Reddit hug of death, why aren't we cocky? But rightfully so. This is awesome. And like people loved it. It got hit with 11,000 page views and 660 email signups in the first 30 minutes.
Wow.
And so, now I have like an email list, and I haven't done that much with it, but the whole point of it was to experiment, like, okay, how can I collect emails? How can I drive traffic? How can I do affiliate sales? Like all of these different things that I was playing with, and I played with the user experience so that I could tell the story that I told you through the design of the site. And, I wanted it to be self-sustaining without me being involved telling the story. And all of those things were experiments. It was all within one package. And it's stuff like that I just love pushing the envelope and kind of seeing where my boundaries are and what I know and don't know and what works and doesn't work.
Right. Now, you sort of said you were the introvert amongst your family of extroverts. So is this the extroverted Brian now, the experimenter?
Yeah, it took me a while to kind of figure out my communication style, but I've been told, I think my favorite compliment was the Miss Vermont. So like she's won numerous pageants, and she's a very well communicated, poised individual. And I spoke once, and she's like, I'm extroverted, but being around you makes me feel introverted. I'm like, oh, like I'm the extrovert's extrovert.
Nice. Yeah, you've changed. It sounds like, at least of new people who meet you, perhaps. You don't seem introverted to me. We really don't know each other, but you're very talkative, and you're trying all these wild experiments. So I think those are kind of tired tags in many ways too. Of course, introvert, extrovert. A lot of people have multiple sides, of course, to their personality. So now you have a primary website called Ghost Influence. Maybe tell us about that was where you started blogging.
Yeah, so it was originally My Social Sherpa, and then I rebranded it, and then it's a weird story as to how that evolved. But basically, I started Ghost Influence as the membership site, and then just kind of realized like that's the brand that I want to focus on, because basically what it is, it's about passive prompts. It's like you have to be passive and completely transparent, but you have to prompt someone. So you can't manipulate someone, because then if they uncover the manipulation, then they're going to feel cheated. And that's why I don't like things like NLP, because if you do NLP on someone who knows NLP, then they can immediately recognize that it's NLP, and they're like, really, dude, come on.
Yeah.
And it's a cheap trick. And so what Ghost Influence is all about is digital empathy. and understanding who you're talking to on an emotional level and what their wants and needs are and how you can appeal to them in a genuine and authentic way. And a lot of times, I'll talk to someone and they're like, oh, like, is this for me? And I'm like, it's not, you're not ready. And that is far more profitable than trying to sell to everyone, because if that person doesn't come in, then they come back when they're ready, and then they come in and they're even more appreciative. And it's just being human and treating people as people, and not thinking that clicks come from anywhere other than human beings. So it's really, I think it's really fun in the Ghost Influence community. People throw stuff at me of like, I spend $1 million a month on Facebook ads and I'm trying to increase my conversion rates. What do I do? Or, I'm an artist and I make, 6 figures in e-commerce, and I'm trying to build my brand better so that I can raise my rates. What do I do? So for me, selfishly, it's just a lot of puzzles, and I love puzzles.
Right.
But it's everything from people who are just starting to people who have been going for a long period of time, and everybody has questions, and I just love connecting answers. It's not that I know everything, and I definitely don't. It's more that I love hunting for answers and connecting people to things. A few of my close friends know that I have an ongoing challenge of give me something that I can't find. And I've gotten like, I met this girl at a bar. Her first name is this. She's from this state, and like this is what she looks like. Find me her mother's address, and it took me 30 minutes.
Well, that's very impressive. In this day and age, that it is possible. I have done similar things myself in an effort to learn more about, a target audience perhaps I was writing to, or who some of the people actually were, what they're into, some of their beliefs and or hobbies. Now, Ghost Influence is primarily now a membership-driven site.
It is. So it's the membership, and then and it's slowly converting into a Medium publication.
Okay. So you're now publishing your content from there on Medium?
Yeah, Medium is just they've been doing some interesting stuff, and basically it's WordPress. You have a CMS, and then you create content, and then you put it on Facebook, and then Facebook drives traffic to WordPress in a very simplistic way. Medium is also a CMS, and you can also post Medium articles on Facebook, and then Facebook will drive traffic to them, but you also get traffic from Medium. So it's a lot like that. It's that same structure, except you get traffic on both ends. And they have a really engaged community, and kind of there's a lot that you can do with tagging and responses. And so I basically redesigned all of Ghost Influence, and then Medium kind of came into my radar, or onto my radar. And I was like, So yeah, it's migrating over there. There's some stuff that they can't do yet. You can't embed like JavaScript, so I can't put my podcasts and stuff on there. So that's part of the reason I'm not migrating entirely. But if you have a blog and it's just a blog and you're creating content, Medium is a fantastic platform to investigate.
That's excellent. That's excellent advice. I know some people recently have done some great things with Medium. Myself, some of the people who have been on this podcast, in fact. Now, Brian, what's your going forward? What sort of goals do you have, and what sort of, where are you going to take Ghost Influence? Do you have a long-range site, or are you just have short-range experimentation, ideas?
I do. I'm actually 2 years into a 4-year plan.
Okay.
Ghost Influence is the cog in a much larger machine, and it all kind of leads to me having the ability to start a social network. And a very, very different structure than anything that currently exists, but that takes a piece from a lot of different things. And the reason being is that I want to create a place where people see what they want to see. They get to discover what they want to discover, but they also understand why it's put in front of them. On Facebook, you don't understand why this piece of content is in your newsfeed versus something else, but if you had the ability to understand, you'd effectively be understanding yourself. Facebook knows you better than you know you. And if they had the ability to translate some of that data, then you'd be able to not only discover new things, but you'd be able to trust the process a little bit more. And that's the thing that I really want to focus on is trust of what you're seeing, so that you understand why it's coming into your field of view.
So this would be like a transparent Facebook.
A little bit, with a level of democracy.
Okay. I like the sounds of that. And that's within the next couple of years you're looking to get that rolling.
Yeah, I'm kind of we're planning at looking at the beta in 18 months, and that's just for a variety of reasons. I didn't have the tech skills to build it, I didn't have the finances to hire someone, and I didn't have the background to raise the money. So I built it in pieces. And Ghost Influence is a piece. I have a private mastermind that's a piece. I have, a client offered me a CMO role at a publishing company, and that was like, okay,
Right?
let's reevaluate. That actually is a great piece because of the network that that brings. And I was like, if I build this and then move to something else, then the investors are going to want to invest in me. So it's helping other people win over the course of many years for one goal. And I tell people the full story a lot of times, and they're just like, "Holy shit!" And I'm like, "Yeah, it's a very long game, but I like the long game because you have to be committed and you have to troubleshoot your way through it and help other people win along the way and recruit your team and do cool shit."
Yeah, it sounds like you have a real vision for what you want to create.
Yeah, it's evolved slowly over time, very slowly.
Now, what is your? This is something we don't get into a lot on the show because we usually focus on the person themselves. But having a sarcastic family, practical jokers myself, and being a professional magician myself,
Uh-huh.
what does your family think of all this?
It's one of those things where, and I can kind of describe it visually, is that they have their head kind of cocked back a little bit and at an angle, and they're like looking at me like through the corner of their eye, like I'm not sure what to make of this, but I'm kind of nodding and like, all right, that's cool. So I mean, they're always very supportive. Just most of the time they don't know why.
Right,
Uh, So they're like, "Oh, good job," but they don't understand what good job
right.
means. I got featured in Forbes as a Reddit marketing expert, and they just heard like they saw my face and they saw Forbes, and they were calling all the grandparents and the uncles and telling the people at the temple, and let's call your high school teachers who thought that you were never going to be able to learn, and they were, because that was their metric of like, oh my god. And for me, I'm just like, I met a girl while I was drunk in Mexico and we became friends. And 2 years later, she's writing for Forbes and she asked if she could interview me. Like in my head, that's the math that's going on. And I wrote about that too. But yeah, I mean, it's a fun relationship that it's constantly developing, and I'm constantly looking for new ways to explain like, so this is what this is, and this is why it's important.
Now, what's the last sort of? I hesitate to use the term real, but what's the last sort of traditional job that you had?
I mean, other than what I'm doing right now.
Yeah, I mean, you said you're taking on a CMO role with a publishing company, right?
Yeah. So
But
that's even kind of, I mean, real is a very relative term, but I have a W-2. This is the first time I've had a W-2 in 6 years.
right,
Um, and it's so Prime Mind is exploratory journalism designed to foster critical thinking. So it's a bit like the Atlantic for millennials. We've written on everything from male chastity belts to the ethics of head transplants. Um,
nice.
so it's an interesting social conversation because I go from talking to neuroscientists to talking to professional dominatrix on a daily basis, and it's endlessly entertaining for me because I'm like, oh, like I get to ask questions of people who are talking about our content and learn, but then also like carry a conversation with this really interesting person, and that's considered a job. But so before that, my last real job was working at a nonprofit as like a social media marketing manager, and that was 6 7 years ago.
Wow. And so 6 or 7 years ago, you went to work for yourself, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I basically had a gap in clients, and I tried to do it on my own, and had a gap, and saw an opportunity to take a job, and worked there for 4 months, and ended up getting fired because I was too efficient, which was the reason that I got fired from the job before that, was because I was also too efficient. They're like, well, if you can do the job I hired you for in 20 hours, then why am I paying you for 40? So we'll make you part time and take away your health insurance. And I'm like, well, then you can
Uh,
find someone else to do it. It's a plague of mine. I don't like to do anything more than once or take too long, so I get really efficient.
yeah, I have a similar past.
Yeah, and it always results in us needing faster computers.
Yeah, that's right. With more RAM.
Yeah, the new ones are coming out tomorrow.
He's so excited, everybody. He's so excited. Now, so you have Ghost Influence. You have a vision for a more transparent social engagement, where people understand why they're being engaged. What other things are you working on currently?
I with Ghost Influence, I mean, part of it is I got a little frustrated a year and a half ago, and I just said like I'm done teaching. I don't want to teach anymore. Because it's just very draining when you are putting something out there and people don't follow it. You're like, I want to help you. Here's how you should, do the thing, and then people don't execute it, and you're like, you can teach a man to fish kind of thing, but if you teach them to fish and then they sit and watch Netflix all day, it's not going to do them much good. And so I just got tired of it, and I said, instead of teaching, I want to model. I want to do something and to be like, hey, here's how I did the thing, and explain my entire process. So I look for these projects, and I have a long list of projects, and I know what and basically I just constantly revisit when I meet new people, and I'm like, oh, I could work with this person on that thing and kind of structure it in that way and whatever. Halloween, I was looking for a costume, and I found this ridiculous sleeveless hoodie that's made entirely of fiber optics. So it looks kind of like a normal hoodie, but then you turn it on, the whole thing seam to seam glows.
Nice.
And I took it out to a few clubs, and it ended up in some cute girls being more interested than they normally would be, and some compliments, and people are like all over me, like, this is the cool thing. It was the coolest thing ever. And everybody wanted to know where I got it. And the guy's brand just is terrible, and his website's terrible, and his shipping time is terrible, and his price point is terrible. And I kind of tried to work with him a little bit, and he's like, I'm not interested. So I started calling a few friends who do manufacturing and saying, like, here's the thing, how can we make it? After about 5 months of just slow kind of like asking different people and convincing them that I can actually sell it if they give me the right price point, finally got a price. And the cost per unit's about a fourth of what he was charging customers. And so we're a colleague of mine building it out, just kind of a fun part-time project. And I know enough influencers that are also EDM fans that, I just hand them one of these jackets, and that's going to be all over Snapchat and Instagram and YouTube.
Right.
Yeah. So I mean, like stuff like that, where it's just, seeing an opportunity and saying, here's a thing that everybody seems interested in and everybody wants to get, and everybody wants to buy, but it's too expensive. So can we make it cheaper, and can we drive enough traffic to get people to buy it in bulk to make it worthwhile? And if we can, then we can sell other things. And if we can't, then we spent $5,000 and nothing happens.
Now, it seems like you said you got fired for efficiency. For me in the past, it was always like I'm lazy by nature. So I would just try to find like the shortest, between 2 points, get the job done as efficiently as possible, so I could spend the rest of the time doing whatever. Now, for you, but you seem obviously as well highly productive. So are there some secrets perhaps that you can pass along to other people that maybe need a kick in the ass about how to get the most out of their day, how to get stuff done? I mean, you're building EDM jackets, you rank people with Facebook ads, you're going to start your own social network. I mean, you're getting a lot of stuff done. You have a lot on your plate, and you're constantly looking to solve new puzzles with your Ghost Influence crew there. Maybe you have some tips for people on productivity.
Yeah, I mean, I think the three things, the few things I'll say that really hit me the hardest. One is Hal Elrod's book, The Miracle Morning, which is all about waking up and setting like this rigid routine of what you do every morning, and knowing how to modify that on a regular basis. If you don't have time, say like, shit, I woke up late, knowing how to take a 3-hour routine and put it into 30 minutes. So you still have the feeling that like, I am ready for my day. That's the first thing. There's another book called The One Thing, which is all about only focusing on one thing at a time. That in many different ways is huge leverage. Tim Ferriss's kind of notion of batching your activities with emails. I usually try and not keep my email open so that I can just power through it in 30 minutes versus, spending a cumulative amount of time of like 3 hours over the day. Rescue Time is a fantastic app for tracking how much time you're spending and then looking at it and saying, how can I spend less time on these activities? Those are kind of my productivity things from a working standpoint. I look to work with people, whether they be partners, colleagues, contractors. I look to work with people who have the ability to think critically. And so I don't want someone to come back to me and say, like if I say, go make me lunch, which I would never say that, but just an easy example, go make me lunch. If they go, okay, what do you want? Are you feeling something this? Do you want me to make reservations? Do you want to make it here? And I'm like,
right. Too many questions.
Like you need to just know enough about, hey, do you want sushi or do you want a sandwich? Sandwich. Great. Done. They go get me a sandwich. I don't, because they would know that I don't care what it is, like I eat pretty much anything, right? Having the ability to just like collect information and get smarter over time. My work wife, Catherine, I'll shout out to her, who I've worked with for 3 years. I found her on Craigslist, and everything that I ever threw at her, she just took it and ran. To the point where I'm like, hey, learn how to, go learn how to do this thing, compile everything that you can find into one document and make it so that a contractor that we can pay, $4 an hour from another country can understand it and execute it. So she spends a week, figures out how to do YouTube SEO, which that was the thing that I assigned her to. She figured out how to do it. I didn't know that much about it. And she went and figured it out and made a guide, and we handed it off to a contractor, and they did it for a fraction of the price. And then she's now off doing something else and managing that person. So working with people that you can trust, planting, Ash Ambridge actually talked about it, planting pillars of trust around you. Having an attorney that you can say, make this for me, and then not have to read it. I've had attorneys before where I'm like reading 60-page documents of legal jargon because I need to make sure that you did it right. And they didn't, and it's like they didn't understand what I was doing and they didn't ask the question to make sure, so they fucked it up. So just being able to trust the people that you work with, and that takes time. So it's not that you're going to find someone and instantly be like, please manage all of my finances.
Yeah.
It takes time.
Now, when you found your work wife on Craigslist, was there? You obviously had a vetting process, but did you get lucky, or did you have to run through a whole gamut of people?
I mean, I have probably hired and fired 50 people over probably more than that. But the way that I do it is that I have a job, I hire 3 people for the job, and then I assign them all the same tasks and see who performs the best. So trials, I love trials. And with her, I hired her, and I hired another girl as a project manager, and she just outshines gloriously. And so I made her senior project manager and had her manage that other PM and an intern and then a bunch of other contractors. And she just always has stuck with me through every project. And now she's actually going to be working on the glowing jacket project. Yeah. So it's a relationship that develops over time, but it was really like, I'm going to invest as much as I can in you. And after 30 days, it was very abundantly clear that she was taking all of it and saying, give me more.
Right.
And that was what I really always have appreciated about her.
That's awesome, man. Now, you've given us a lot to think about. You've done all sorts of experiments. I'm sure people have learned, when they listen to this, they'll learn a bunch of different things. You're known as a Reddit marketer, for blowing up the Reddit, getting the Reddit hug going. Now, maybe for people looking for tips who maybe don't market on Reddit, who've never thought about doing it or have their own products and services, what are some quick, I'm sure they can come to your Ghost Influence site and get the full story by getting into your membership group, but what are some of the quick hitting tips?
Yeah, Reddit and marketing tend to not go happily in the same sentence together.
Right.
And I've gotten blasted on Reddit a few times because, like, when I got featured on Forbes, the editors changed the title to the magic formula for going viral on Reddit, which, simplistically speaking, if you took the hour-long interview and summarized it, sure. But at first glance, it's like, come on, guys, that's the clickbaitiest title for that piece. And so I've gotten blasted for a few things like that. And then I jump into the conversation, and after like 3 hours of chatting, they're like, oh, okay, so it's like marketing by making something cool, not by like tricking people into, paying attention.
Right.
And so really what Reddit is it's a collection of communities, and you have to find the community that fits. And then, say I have, if you have a product or an idea and you find the community that you think it would be interested, you have to understand them and understand what they want to see and how you can position what you have as being to their benefit. Now, that rarely ever happens. Like, you have to package it in a different way. You have to create a new piece of content that maybe references or talks to it, but you can't just say like, hey, I made a thing and you should buy it. very rarely. Sometimes you have something that's really fucking cool, and I'll just find someone and I'm like, that needs to go on Reddit, and then I'll move it over and they'll sell shit tons of stuff because that's organic. That's what it's made for. If you're doing content, like, I mean, the easiest way to say it is like, find a community that you really jive with and understand who you're talking to. Each community typically like speaks in a very distinct voice. Figure out that voice, and a lot of times, like, you're going to relate to it. Like I relate to, there's a community called Saved You a Click. It's a new community, and it's all about posting clickbait titles and then doing a vertical bar. And then, so it's like, you'll never guess what Rodney Dangerfield did before he died. And then it's like, vertical bar, and it's like, he ate a ham sandwich,
Oh, I see. Yeah, people add to it. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and so it's just kind of fun because it's like a bunch of like people shitting all over marketing, and that's typically what I tend to do. So like finding that group of people that jive with you, and then basically figuring out, okay, how can I entertain those people? Like, they're my friends now. What can I do that would entertain my friends? And that's really the process. That's what digital empathy is understanding who you're talking to and saying like, oh, I heard this story once. You'll really enjoy it. If you meet an internet marketer and start talking about, like I've done some, a friend of mine has done all of Pornhub's marketing over the last like 3 years. And like if they're an internet marketer, I talk about him because he's a cool dude with interesting stories. And he sent me a Snapchat once, which I wish I saved, but he just is like holding it up and kind of like recording a video, and he's like, so this is what I'm doing right now. And then he like starts to turn, and you just see this line of girls sitting on benches around this big room. Like, it was just kind of like a weird like room with benches around the corner. And he's like, I'm currently teaching a whole bunch of porn stars how to use Snapchat. I'm like, I fucking love you. Like, literally in a room, he's in a room of 15 porn stars teaching them how to use Snapchat. Like, this is ridiculous.
Now, that may lead me to another question. Now, usually,
What's his Snapchat handle?
Well, no, no. We can get that off the air. But what I was going to ask you is, I put some people. You seem like the perfect guy to put on the spot. Some people seem not to respond to this as well. I usually have to ask them off the air. But if you had another person that you could recommend that I interview who would make a great guest for this show, who would that person be?
I think, honestly, Matt Yano, who would be the Pornhub guy.
Okay.
And he is a very, very similar thought process as me in terms of how he breaks things down, but more focused on the press and kind of content creation side of things. Like, I like making businesses and software and things, and he makes stories. That's why I really love working with him on a variety of projects, and I'll bring him in on stuff and he'll bring me in on stuff. But knowing what people do, knowing how they communicate, and just being able to like, oh, I need to call Matt for this. I think that has been the most productive thing for me, and the most profitable as well, is just really learning people's styles and kind of like their fighting styles and what they're interested in, so that when I have an idea, I go, I need to talk to this guy because he would be a great partner. Or, I need to run this idea by him. And then it's in an exchange. I get emails all the time like, hey, I'm working on this project right now for the Australian government. And, what do you have for Facebook marketing ideas? And I'm like, yeah, and it's fun. I think, just building that network over time has been a really interesting thing, but yeah, definitely Matt.
Okay. And maybe the last question, you mentioned earlier, of course, you're known for your famous Facebook prank that went viral. And you mentioned a number of courses that you went to learn about Facebook ads. One of our audiences we get for this show, people who listen to this show, are newer business owners or solopreneurs. Of course, Facebook ads are very hot, have been for a while. What sort of advice do you have for people if they want to learn more about Facebook ads? Because you mentioned outgrowing a few courses and so forth. If you have any advice on that front.
Yeah, I mean, if you're more of an emotional kind of physical communicator, if you like talking to people, and if you prefer the phone over text kind of thing, then I would recommend starting with Amy Porterfield. I haven't been in it for a while, but I always just remember that she helps to bring people in very cleanly, even if you don't understand. Facebook ads are just highly analytical because if A, then B, if B, then C, but you're working with like 20 variables of all the pieces of what you can target and then how you match the message and the type of targeting. Like there's a lot of pieces, so it can get really overwhelming very quickly. If you're more of a verbal communicator and kind of like, more emotional, then I say start with Amy Porterfield. If you're more analytical and you're good at big problems and piecing things together and understanding a lot of, how a lot of dots connect, then start with John Loomer. If you start with Amy Porterfield, you can go over to John Loomer later. But those are the two people that I always recommend, just because they have very different styles of teaching, and the two styles balance very well.
Very nice. Great. Brian, you have really dropped a lot of knowledge on our people here today. You are exciting to follow. I love your blog. I've tried to read as much of it as I can before I talk to you today, and I'll keep continuing to read. People want to get a hold of you. Of course, get ghostinfluence.com. Is that the best way?
Yeah, ghostinfluence.com, and I'm at ghostinfluence on pretty much everything, and primemind.com, and primemind, well, prime_mind on Twitter. But yeah, I mean, I've actually recommended that to a lot of writers and copywriters to check out PrimeMind with a marketing approach. I mean, look at what we're doing. And it's all content, right? I mean,
Right.
we're breaking all the rules in the sense of how you talk about things. I mean, we're 1,000-word plus articles, and we're doing marketing in a different way. We're not begging for the click. We're creating deep content. And what's interesting is that if you follow how those stories are spreading, a piece will get picked up, and we'll get organic traffic to it for months, because it's the same thing as a Facebook prank. It's something that people have never seen. They've never seen someone that's taken the time to go deep. And I think that regardless of what content that you're creating, whether it be about male chastity belts or about internet marketing, to have the bravery to go deep and be willing to dive into one specific thing as deeply as possible, and communicate that. And then people are going to be like, wow, like you have the ability to go deep with this one thing, and then you jump to another thing, and they're like, holy shit, whoa, I thought you were a Facebook guy, you're a Reddit
Right.
guy,
Right.
and it's the same thought process. It's not that I'm like an expert of everything. It's one thought process that I enjoy finding different ways to apply it to.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that is primemind.com?
Yep. Yes.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for coming on the show, Brian. You've been a very entertaining guest. I knew you'd be great because I love reading your stuff, and you have a very succinct and upfront way of putting things.
Well, thank you so much for having me on and asking fantastic questions.
Thank you.
I am nothing without my prompts, and you prompted some good stories.
Well, that's awesome, man, and I'll let you know when this comes out. And for everybody who listens to this will be about probably 7 or 8 weeks from now. We got, as we like to batch, Tim Ferriss style. And for people who listen, of course, also know that we like to thank Ben Sound at bensound.com for the intro and outro music, free, royalty-free music over at bensound.com. Don't know him personally, just use the music, and I'm a big supporter as a result. So everybody check him out. We'll be back next week with yet another exciting guest, hopefully as fun and entertaining and as inquisitive and experimental as Brian. Everyone, talk to you later. Bye-bye.